Pradeep, and everyone else here. It's, as always, a great pleasure and honor to be in front of fellow alumni from the IITs, and as I've been told, a lot of the youngsters here are from Christ College. I was telling Father earlier today that I live only about a walking distance from here, but had never come inside the campus. A relative of mine, a niece of ours, actually used to study here, and she is currently doing very well in life. I used to drop her off at the main gate, but never came inside. So it is also fortunate for me that I got to see the beautiful campus that you guys get to work out of and play out of. Reminds me of our days in IIT and some of the other universities that I have had the fortune of attending. More than anything else, what I took away from my days at IIT and some of the other universities that I had attended is the pleasure and the company of your fellow students. So that is something that, some of us are very fortunate, like the IIT alumni networks. I'm sure you will actually grow up and be able to create those kinds of networks. As you know, we live in a networked world, so as you move along and grow in life, that happens to be one of the key resources that you can go back to create something and give back to both yourselves and your communities. And that's probably what I have tried to do, and with lots of failures and little bits and pieces of success in between. So with that, I will turn around and talk a little bit about Accel. I will also stop in between. I had the fortune of meeting somebody very famous. I'll talk about it as we move along. So this is what Accel is. We are a 30-year-old, or actually now 35-year-old venture capital firm, started in Silicon Valley, and now having offices in Silicon Valley, New York, London, and Bangalore. We also used to have a fairly strong affiliation in China, which worked for a long period of time, but we have actually had to break away from it more recently. But just a sort of a quick sense of the kind of companies that we have invested in. I'm sure everybody knows Facebook. A lot of the people here might know Flipkart. And a lot of the other ones, you can go back and take a peek at these websites, and these are all very well-known global companies, and we are very fortunate that we have been able to partner with some of these entrepreneurs to build these companies to scale. Next slide, please. This is what we have been doing in India. We started here in Bangalore in 2005. That is when we first set up a fund that later on became Accel. Very fortunate, early on investors, of course, in Flipkart and Mitra and a bunch of other companies that you guys probably go and shop out of on a daily basis. The latest ones being, food delivery, Swiggy, home services, Urban Clap, and then there are, Ola cabs that you probably have used to get to this meeting this morning. And a host of others. Even one interesting one here is Collectibilia, which works with Virat Kohli and to create the brand called Wrong. I don't know if you guys have used the Wrong brand, but if you, this is Wrong spelled wrong. So if you haven't, then you should probably go back and try out some of that merchandise. Fascinating entrepreneur, very young lady. She's all of 28 now, has been running this company for the last 3 years. So basically started at the age of 25. Phenomenal early success, and we wish her all the luck going forward. Now, I'll just pause here for a minute, and maybe, can you hear me well? Or no? Okay. So it's a little bit constraining to kind of tell a story from behind a standing microphone. Very fascinatingly, I happened to meet a gentleman by the name of Tom Friedman. I don't know if you know of him. He had written this book called The World is Flat. And more recently, when I met him, which was just a few weeks ago, he gave me a copy of this book called Thank You for Being Late. And I hadn't read the book. It was published about a year ago. I jokingly told him, you must be living in Bangalore. Why else would you have a title like that? You know, I have to say that to almost all my meetings. Fortunately for my venture capital firm, a lot of people come to meet me at our office, but they're usually delayed because either, you know, the public transport didn't work, which is almost non-existent. Ola cab did not show up at 8 in the morning because he canceled the ride, or something or the other happened. And it was fascinating to hear that this gentleman who lives halfway around the world in New York and Washington, D.C., had similar experiences every day and turned that into a book. But more interestingly, you know, before I go to the next slide, some of the things that he talked about in the book, one chapter actually talks about, the name of the chapter is, What the Hell Happened in 2007? What the hell happened in 2007? And interestingly, he goes on to explain, you know, some of the things that did happen in 2007. Apparently, January of 2007 is when the first iPhone was publicly introduced in a forum like this as a new way of, you know, using a communication device. And we know, you know, where that took the rest of the world to. Later that year, Android was made available for, you know, general purpose cell phones, and we know how that has changed the world today. Some of the other things that happened in 2007, 2006 end is when this little company called Facebook, they actually opened up from campus to global. So that was sort of, I think, September, October of 2006. That's when that happened, and 2007 it started growing. Twitter was launched as an independent company in 2007. And among other things, Flipkart in India was started in 2007. So what Tom Friedman tells us is that, you know, after 2007, and the other thing I forgot to tell you is, there is this little thing in computing called Moore's Law, which says that every so many months or years, the compute capacity actually doubles. And there was a very interesting change that happened to the way transistors were built. And in 2007, which is for the first time, non-silicon elements were used in actually creating transistors. And that ensured that Moore's Law, which was fundamentally talked about in 1965 when I was born, and continued to be true till 2007, actually continues to be true even now. You know, so this basically says that we are at this inflection point in 2007 when a lot of interesting things happened. You know, Facebook became public in the sense that they sort of started opening up for the public, and that started this whole, you know, social networking paradigm. So did Twitter. Obviously, iPhone came into being, Android came into being, and Moore's Law got a little fillip, which ensured that even today, every 2.5 years, the sort of the density of transistors actually doubles on a chip, which makes it better, cheaper, faster for us to compute, cloud compute, and do this whole new generation of things, which is called artificial intelligence and machine learning in a tractable way, right? And now I'll go to the next slide. Next slide, please. And the one after this. So I hope you can see this well. What intrigued me about Friedman was, you know, is this just a US phenomena, or was this happening somewhere else? So we went back and took a little dig at China, and what we found out is really the 3G revolution in China happened around 2006, second half. Can you hear me? Is this working? So I'll go back. Yeah, 2006, second half. And you see all these graphs. These are basically talking about, you know, the sort of the penetration of cell phones and other interesting, you know, mobile and online user sort of inflection points, which started to happen in 2006. And in the next slide, just look what that got us. Just hit the next, please. Give us a graph. Oh, so that graph. No, go back. One more. This graph is not visible. So basically, just let's go to the next slide, and I'll just talk to it. Maybe I can send it to whoever is interested. So what I was trying to show here is the number of unicorns, which is billion-dollar companies, which we as VCs, we kind of salivate over all the time. But more than anything else, it's very interesting because these are companies that changes lives. So Facebook changes lives, and Twitter changes lives. And so does a bunch of these companies that got created after 2007 in China. And I believe the last number, which is very hard to read here, is about 2017, there are 15 new billion-dollar companies that got created in China. And again, this is just sort of taking off from what Friedman was saying and trying to apply it to another country. And then the interesting stuff is what we believe is India ready for. So the next slide, please. This is what is happening in India. Yeah, let's go here. This is what is happening in India. You know, the geo revolution, and the graph on the right is probably indicative, because you can see that from 2016 to 2017 and now getting into 2018, the data usage, and I'm sure each of you, especially the kids who go to Christ College, you probably have a geo number. Right? I know my son does, and he's roughly that same age group. And they swear by it. It's like the fastest thing that ever happened in India in terms of data connectivity. 1 GB of data in the basic plan every day, and then you can go to whatever you want, YouTube videos and whatever else, right? And that has created this 9x plus increase in data consumption in India. So at least on one of the facets, we are getting poised in 2017, and hopefully, I'm hoping that 10 years from now, Friedman will come and write a chapter saying what the hell happened in India in 2017, right? And that's, we'll go to the next slide to say that. So digital penetration obviously is increasing. The other, yeah, let's go to the next one, the pie chart, yeah. So here, this is the other very interesting part of, what is required for large economies to scale. The per capita income has to increase. And it has actually done in India. So if you look back in the last 10 years, we have roughly more than doubled the GDP and the per capita income. So from 500 billion to 2 trillion, I think, has happened in about 15, 16 years. And we are projecting that in the next 10 years, so let's say 2025, somewhere in the 2.5 to 2.7 trillion kind of range is where India is going to end up, and which implies that 1.3 trillion of discretionary spend. And discretionary spend is, things that, going to a movie is generally discretionary. So outside of the roti, kapda, and makan, most of the stuff that you would want to do is actually considered as discretionary spending, because roti, kapda, and makan sort of stays stable. So as people's income increases, they get into more of discretionary spending. And that, amount 10 years from now is going to be this huge 1.3 trillion. So let's go to the next slide. And this is sort of just to make the thing obvious that what does it imply? 1.3 trillion would mean that a lot of these new companies, obviously the Flipkarts of the world and the Olas of the world will grow much bigger, but somewhere down this corridor, somebody will come up with this striking idea that might create or start a company today, which will become really big in 10 years. So the next. Sorry. So here is just sort of a quick graph of, how much of venture financing is available in India. And it is only interesting if you are ready to start a company, but it just says that things are on an increase. So next, risk capital is available. So that's the summary of that. So there are these three things that is happening, right? So, consumption is started to grow. It will continue to grow as the per capita income increases. Digital adoption has obviously increased, and then risk capital is becoming available. So the next, please. And that's where I would like to stop. So if you guys are ready, so are we. You should start the journey if you haven't started yet. Thank you.